Hi, my name is Joanna Whitney. I am an intuitive artist, a student of natural law, and an energy healer. And I'm going to be discussing the chapter in the Kybalion today called The Divine Paradox. However, I'm going to take a break from reading from the Divine Paradox, and instead I'm going to read some notes that I made based on meditation on considering the Divine Paradox, written in 1908 by the three initiates, about absolute truth versus relative truth, as it could be misunderstood today, in today's world, as a result of us humans having lost critical thinking skills being taught to us, and just the sea of distractions that we currently live in versus how the minds of 1908 who wrote that book without those distractions and with critical thinking skills, how it could be misunderstood. So I'm going to take this liberty of reading from some things that I wrote and reviewing some other people's work to just give a new light on that chapter. So when we think about the divine paradox, we can't use today's standards to think about absolute truth versus relative truth, because we have lost so much in how we derive the relative truth of today, meaning my perception of what's happening. Basically, we have to come up to the basic standards of thinking that people used in 1908 before we can even begin to approach understanding what this chapter is about. And because of that, I'm going to introduce some other ideas here before I move on. In fact, I'm going to recommend that this chapter might require several years of preparation mentally to get to the point where one could understand the true relative truth. I'm going to recommend a film to watch if you haven't already seen this film. It's called Idiocracy, so that you could get an understanding of where we are at collectively as humanity, so as not to misuse and misunderstand this chapter. Idiocracy, I believe, was created in the 80s, and it's definitely predictive programming for what's happening now. I believe it's free on YouTube. I'll try to find a link for the description. So, going back to the chapter, the divine paradox is about being able to contain within oneself absolute truth and relative truth. But what is truth? Truth is why we experience suffering in our world. Truth is nothing more than that which is, that which has actually occurred in our reality. Events actually play out in our 3D space-time reality, and that is truth. Events occur, and we can actually understand what is actually taking place within us and without us. The reason we experience suffering is because we as a collective have gone off the path of truth. We are engaged in illusion. Fundamental axioms, which are fundamentally not true and therefore we suffer if these ideas are not in alignment with what actually is. We believe fundamental axioms which are untrue. An axiom is a statement which is regarded as already having been established, something that is taken as true, and the problem comes when things that are lies are thought to be true. Self-knowledge is what we need if we are to not take deception as truth. Human consciousness and how it works, how it has an expression through the physiology, neuroscience, how the brain works. These are all things we have to know and understand. Manipulation and deception go to work on us on a daily basis nowadays, to pull us away from the truth and to blind us from what is in plain sight and right in front of us. Adolf Hitler said, make the lie big, keep it simple, keep it saying it, and eventually the people will believe it. Make the lie big means that the lie has to be about something that everyone thinks about and that everyone values, general concepts that people accept. Paul Joseph Goebbels, who was Adolf Hitler's propagandist, said, the bigger the lie, the more it will be believed. Self-knowledge is the solution to this understanding of who we really are, and how to know that is by yourself, how your own consciousness works, and how to bring that consciousness to a place of balance. The Oracle of Delphi says, heed these words, you who wish to probe the depths of nature. If you do not find within yourself that which you seek, neither will you find it outside yourself. If you ignore the wonders of your own house, how do you expect to find other wonders? In you is hidden the treasure of treasures. Know thyself, and you will know the universe and the gods. This statement reflects a fundamental core truth about the nature of reality, that we are embedded in the law of correspondence. Our reality is self-similar across scales. It is fractal in nature. It is holographic, as above, so below, as within, so without. If you understand enough about individual units of consciousness, then you can understand the whole of consciousness, which is nature. Why do people not know the self? Why are we experiencing all the types of problems that we are experiencing? People do not understand themselves, the nature of their own consciousness. But to go back to the fundamental values and how they dictate the quality of our lives, most people do not value truth. And this is why we are in the mess that we are in. People have lost the idea that truth is valuable and that it means something to the experience of the value of their lives. That truth dictates the quality of that which we experience. When we are in alignment with what is true, when we speak the truth and we live according to what is true, then the quality of our experience improves and we do not suffer. If, however, the nature of our lives varies in accordance with what is truth, then we experience suffering. In proportion that we go off the path of truth, this is a fundamental law of nature, like gravity. It doesn't matter if you believe in gravity or not. If you walk off a cliff, you are going to experience gravity. You are bound by it. You can choose to ignore it, but you are going to suffer proportionately to the amount that you ignore that law. The difference between two forms of not knowing are nescience and ignorance. Nescience is a formal term for not knowing because you would not be expected to know or understand. However, ignorance is a deliberately turning away from something that you can be responsibly expected to know or understand. Ignorance. Humanity does not exist in a state of nescience, but rather in a state of ignorance. In a way, this is a violation of natural law because we're violating, we're basically stealing from ourselves. We're basically coercing ourselves to believe lies. That is ignorance. And we don't get off. We don't get a reprieve from knowing the truth. People do not want to look at the truth because of how ugly it has become. Because we have descended in consciousness to a level that we should never have gotten to. The knowledge is all around us. It is whether we will reach out to take it. And once we understand the truth, will we be willing to fearlessly take it to others around us? How many of us will be willing to speak the truth into existence? Whether that will be uncomfortable for us or not, telling the truth creates oppositional circumstances between people, which brings us to the biggest lie. And that's what I wanted to really get to about this chapter, because of the biggest lie, which is being so vehemently perpetrated upon us right now. It's our version of relative truth is so degraded that I don't think we could use that in looking at this chapter. The most dangerous ideology that exists. This is a fundamental ideology in the Western world, so prevalent and so insidious. It's called solipsism. Solipsism. The main deception, the philosophical notion that one's own mind is all that exists, and that one's perceptions are equated to reality and truth. Your perceptions are all that there is. Relative truth is the only truth. But you see, nowadays, that means something so much more degraded than it did in 1908. There is no such thing as absolute truth. This is the ideology that is placed out there by the dark occult to dissuade people from ever really going on the journey, never starting on the spiritual path of life. Because if you can convince someone, if the dark occult can convince someone that there is no truth, that it's all relative, that it's all based on people's perceptions, that no matter how far from morality something is, it's all relative, then the dark occult really has that person where they want them to begin to manipulate their sense of reality. Solipsism, solipsism. You may never have heard of it. It's not spoken about. It's just being put forward. The first tenet of solipsism is there is no such thing as truth. There is no such thing as the way things are. there essentially is no reality. There are no actual experiences. It's all just one person's perception. If my mind ceases to exist, the universe ceases to exist. Nothing really exists to a solipsist. Nothing really matters. The second tenet of solipsism is even if something exists, nothing can actually be known about it. There is no such thing as knowledge. Knowledge does not exist. The third tenet of solipsism is even if something could be known about anything, you can never actually communicate that to any other living being. Knowledge cannot be communicated. Now, that may seem too abstract to you, but if you think about it, you hear it all the time, my truth. Oh, well, that can't be real because I don't see it that way. And then, well, even if it's real, I can't trust, because there's so many differing opinions out there. I can't trust that there's really anything I can really know about this thing or whatever. And then the third tenet, even if I know something about something, I can't communicate it to others. Because there's so many differing opinions in the big soup. So I can't really communicate anything. I can't learn to communicate anything to anyone else. Solipsism is the biggest lie, and it is what the manipulators really want propagated to other people, because that means they will never begin the awakening process. The awakening process takes one initial leap of faith that there is truth to be found on the journey. Look into it. Look into solipsism. See if you can see solipsism in conversations, on TV, if you watch the news. See if you can see solipsism. And looking at the vast expanse between relative truth and absolute truth in the divine paradox, it would be easy these days to think solipsistically rather than to take the higher ground, which is to use the higher principles of absolute truth, morality, the golden rule, and apply them to relative truth, your perceptions. Utilizing the principle of correspondence, use love your neighbor as yourself, an absolute truth, perhaps not truly understandable, but when applied, reaping the benefits. Or, I reap what I sow, therefore giving more than what is expected, keeping my temper, going the extra mile for my brothers and sisters, leaving a situation better than I found it. All these principles of absolute truth and applying them to my present experience of relative truth, and thereby opposing solipsism, understanding and embodying that I have the power to declare that the all is in all, but all is not the all. But by making that declaration and embodying its meaning is using the higher laws to overcome the lower laws. So take some time to walk around outside and look at things in nature and declare that the all is in all, but that all is not the all. And allow that to sink in. The idea that perception is reality is that which the manipulators want to embed in the culture. Perception is not reality. The quality of our experience is dictated by how closely aligned our perceptions come with truth. Our goal in life needs to be to bring our perceptions into harmony with truth, with that which is, so that we are not constantly engaged in fantasy, so that we are not constantly ignoring that which is going on around us. And more importantly, we are not ignoring that which is going on within us. This is where many of us have trauma, either from childhood experience and now from the new trauma from what has been perpetrated upon us with the most recent events since 2020. The lockdowns, the lies, the jab, and even before that, all the corruption and the psyops that are random shootings or disasters that are all problem, reaction, solution, the Hegelian dialectic that are being perpetrated upon us by the dark occult, Luciferians. The trauma of that experience, either as ignorance and as knowing what is going on and having no power to stop it. So there's two types of trauma, right? Like I could be traumatized by just ignoring what's going on and knowing that because I feel so powerless to do anything about it individually. And then there's the trauma of these continuous bombardments via the poisons in the environment, the destruction of nature and of our society and families. All this trauma makes many of us want to stay in fantasy, to distract ourselves from what is actually happening. And, you know, of course, there are so many distractions available. I mean, I'm speaking my own, you know, I've done this, you know, binge watching TV shows or whatever, Netflix or wherever, you know, you can binge watch on the internet, or so many other distractions, gaming, overusing stimulants or depressants or whatever, you know, to just get by and narrow your focus to your own little world and your own little perception, because there's so much going on that's so abhorrent that you don't want to deal with it. You know, technology could be a distraction, shopping. There's so many things out there that you could use, even sports, even something that's healthy you could use as a distraction from what really is happening right now. And a distraction from the trauma that was either asleep and was awakened during the crazy time, or new trauma that was imposed by the crazy time. All this trauma makes many of us want to stay in fantasy and distract ourselves from what is actually happening. And this is where we have to find ways to release the trauma. In order to get back into alignment with truth, we have to release the trauma, which is why I personally became an energy healer to begin with, because the 2020 antics brought up unresolved trauma in me and got in my way of being able to live the truth. For me to align my thoughts, my emotions, and my actions, I had to release trapped emotions so that I could physically live the truth, align my truth with the truth, even though it meant losing hundreds of friends in my community and walking away from family. Had I not released the trauma inside me, I could have easily turned it outward on others and gone along with the narrative, violating the truth I know to be so. I could have easily done that. I had a moment where I wanted to go along with the crowd because it was easier, I thought, in the moment than to deal with the trauma that was coming up for me. Just like being confronted at the doorway of the store the grocery store by being told I had to wear a mask caused me to become so angry that I couldn't speak, I couldn't stand up for myself, and I knew that my old trauma was being triggered, and I had to figure out a way to release it so that I could be calm and stand up for principle and stand up for my life and my freedom. Let's see where I am here. I always want to live as I think, so I feel, so I act, and I want my thinking to be aligned with natural law principles. So that requires inner unity. Whatever I have to do to maintain inner unity, first, I had to do a lot of shadow work. And that was in 2020. I mean, I've done a lot of shadow work before that, and I thought I was, doing well. But as it turned out, I had a lot more to do. And I found ways to do that, and I will put links in the description about what I came to do, the energy healing work that I started doing. I did it on myself, and then I became certified in it. And it's free, how to do it is free, and you can do it for yourself. And eventually, my hope is that there will be enough people who take responsibility for their trauma that we can think, feel, and act in morality together. Presently, most of us think one thing, feel something else, and take totally haphazard actions. I'm talking about humanity, the collective. Our thoughts, emotions, and actions are not congruent, and therefore we create chaos rather than harmony. Off the path of truth equals suffering. We don't understand how consciousness, morality, and the principles of truth work. The dark occult do know, and they have taken that knowledge and used it as a weapon against other people that they wish to control. They have taken so much knowledge out of general circulation, and they can hide it. They can occult that knowledge. So occult actually means hidden. That's all the word occult means. It's from the Latin occultare, to hide or conceal. We have to be able to look into the heart of darkness. A process of self-examination will solve our problem. So that is the notes that I took, and I also reviewed some work of someone that I respect, and I'll put that in the description as well, to write that. And that's what I feel is necessary to have worked through in order to make true use of chapter 6 in the Kybalion, to bring up the baseline of relative truth to the baseline of truth that was being expressed in 1908. Because our perceptions of truth in 2024 are so degraded compared to that. And so therefore, it would be impossible to really understand this chapter from that vantage point.